Hey there, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to do something a little different. We are going to validate that deep, lingering exhaustion you've probably been feeling. We're pulling back the curtain on the unseen, systemic shifts that are quietly redefining middle-class life. And listen, if you feel like you are doing absolutely everything right but somehow still falling behind, I want you to know right now, you are not alone, and it is really not your fault.
So let's dive right into this by asking the core question that honestly haunts so many hardworking families. Why does working hard feel like running in place? Think about it. You studied, you got the job, you put in the hours, you budget like crazy, and yet you still feel constantly financially stretched. The truth is, the economic ground beneath you has been shifting this entire time. Today, we're going to map out exactly how the rules of the game changed, completely under the radar.
We've experienced a seriously jarring shift over the last few decades. Just think about the old promise: work hard, buy a home, save up, and life just gradually gets better, right? That was the whole foundational formula of the modern dream. But contrast that with our new reality. Now, you work just as hard, but you feel squeezed from absolutely all sides, just trying to survive in a state of fragile stability. Once you realize you're playing by an old set of rules in a totally new economy, the mounting bills and that constant anxiety actually start to make a lot of sense. Okay, let's move into our first section, the core financial squeeze. This is what happens when wages just don't match the world anymore. We have to start by peeling back the first layer of this pressure, which is the tangible, unavoidable numbers of our economy. The crucial point here is this massive gap between relentless price increases and your stagnant paycheck. This is the brutal truth that's slowly draining your family's breathing room. And it's not even just the big, obvious purchases that hurt. It's the quiet, repeated little hikes across the board. A few bucks here, a few bucks there, and suddenly your monthly budget is totally vaporized. Financial strain has basically become a daily lifestyle rather than a rare emergency. And nowhere is this clearer than with our living spaces. What's really wild is how housing has totally transformed. It used to be this secure, long-term asset that brought you peace of mind. Now it's turned into a terrifying, oversized financial burden that dictates, quite literally, every other choice you make. For so many of us, a home feels less like a castle and more like a responsibility that never stops demanding more money, shrinking your savings down to nothing, and turning every other life decision into a stressful compromise. And this squeeze builds into the quietest, yet most powerful trap of all: the modern debt cycle. Debt doesn't always start with a wild shopping spree. Most of the time, in month one, it begins with a totally practical necessity: a surprise medical bill, a leaky roof, or a busted transmission. By month three, you've set up those monthly payment plans. By month six, your current income is entirely dedicated to servicing those past decisions. And by year one, your future freedom is entirely eaten up before the month even begins. It's a relentless cycle.
Let's look at our next section, the premium price of normal, and what happens when the absolute basics become obstacles.
We really need to talk about how just existing and trying to maintain a standard life has become completely unaffordable. Think about the sheer volume of mandatory expenses hitting your bank account every month. We're talking surging rent and housing, escalating groceries and fuel, out-of-pocket healthcare, rising tuition, mandatory digital subscriptions, unavoidable transportation costs. We aren't talking about luxury here. Healthcare and education used to be your pathways to security, but now they're enormous structural burdens. You're essentially paying a premium just to stay healthy enough to keep working while investing heavily in an unpredictable future and barely surviving the present.
I really want you to let this thought sink in. The basics are no longer basic. They are monthly financial obstacles. That perfectly captures why ordinary life is now premium priced. The middle class isn't struggling because everyone's out there living large. You're struggling because simply existing in a modern society requires this massive financial foundation that just keeps expanding year after year.
Which brings us to our third section, the time and energy trap. This is all about your most stolen, valuable resource. Let's pivot from money to time, because this is exactly why you're so deeply exhausted. Think about the household of the past: one stable income, predictable hours, clear work-life boundaries. Now compare that to today's modern household. You're likely balancing two jobs, maybe throwing in some side gigs, dealing with totally blurred boundaries from remote work, and facing this expectation of constant digital availability. You are literally always on. The expectation today is more output and more flexibility, but somehow with way less certainty. You're left with zero recovery margin. And because you're stretched so incredibly thin, our interconnected modern life aggressively punishes any inefficiency. It's a total domino effect. Step 1, you make one small slip, like a late payment, and bam, it dings your credit. Step 2, that lower credit immediately spikes your interest rates. Step 3, higher interest reduces what you can actually afford, sending your daily stress levels through the roof. And Step 4, that chronic stress inevitably damages your work performance and income stability. The middle class has just enough responsibility to be completely exposed to these systems, but nowhere near enough wealth to easily absorb the shock. Now we reach our fourth section, the illusion of success and the quiet weight of expectations. This brings us to the deep psychological traps that make this whole economic struggle feel incredibly isolating, starting with fragile stability. This is the delicate, honestly terrifying balance of modern life. It's appearing financially sound on the outside, while secretly being just one emergency away from total structural collapse. You've got the cars, the devices, the kids in the right schools, you look completely fine to the neighbors, but secretly, you're living on the absolute edge. It's that sinking feeling of having just enough to look okay, but nowhere near enough to actually feel safe. Then, of course, there's lifestyle creep. This is that sneaky psychological trap where slight income bumps naturally lead to permanent lifestyle upgrades. You get a little raise, so you buy a slightly nicer car, or maybe move to a slightly better neighborhood. Technically, you can afford it, but it's impossible to comfortably sustain. So instead of building a genuine financial cushion, you've just bought prettier forms of pressure. Your life looks fantastic on the outside, but your savings account tells the real, incredibly stressful story. And when you add the highly polished illusions of social media into the mix, the whole situation becomes incredibly toxic. Constant online visibility creates a really dangerous illusion of wealth without showing any of the underlying debt. You see everyone's success, but never their struggle. So families who are objectively doing okay end up succumbing to this unfair, quiet shame. And tragically, this isolation actually worsens the spending decisions they're trying to escape in the first place, as they buy things simply to catch up or just to feel worthy. Let's move into our final section, finding freedom in truth. It's time to shift from blame to awareness. We really need to release the pressure valve right here. All of this builds to our most important realization of the entire explainer. That is not failure. That is pressure. Carrying the weight of a demanding, unstable, and increasingly expensive world is a sign of your immense strength and discipline. It is not a character flaw. I mean it. You are trying to live a stable life inside a system that is inherently unstable. We have to shift the blame away from perceived personal failures and place it firmly on this broken system. Because the truth is, middle-class resilience is very real. You are the quiet backbone of society, and even though the pressure is intense, you are not powerless here. By unmasking these invisible forces, you can start using awareness to empower your household's decisions. See the truth of the system clearly. Implement better, truly honest budgeting. Make smarter, proactive choices about your debt. Consistently build up those emergency reserves over time. And perhaps most importantly, set much stronger boundaries with your time and your work. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought for the end of our explainer. Now that you see the real rules, how will you change the way you play? Because awareness inherently changes behavior. I invite you to stop confusing a broken system with personal weakness. Stop blaming yourself for being exhausted. Instead, use this newfound clarity to protect your peace. It is time to rethink your boundaries and build a life that isn't just busy, but one that is truly secure, meaningful, and free. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will catch you in the next explainer.